welcome again to Mojo Zoo. Allow me to take a sip of coffee. It's just been a rough morning. Oh dear God, yeah. Coffee, man, I'm telling you. I'm an absolute addict. So this video is part of the Don't Suck series here at Mojo Zoo. And the purpose of these is to make you a better photographer. We can always be a better photographer. Hey, Ansel Adams had his off days, you know? I mean, there were days, you know, at like Yosemite that just didn't go well. It's totally fogged in. Station wagon broke down. Nothing was giving him the zonal tones that he wanted. For this series, the Don't Suck series, is little tiny steps that you can take to make a better photograph. Little nuggets of help. So today we're talking about bokeh, B-O-K-E-H. It is simply, not all things are in focus. Either you've got your subject, right? And either everything in the background is really out of focus, or things in the foreground are out of focus, or maybe both. You know, you have your focal plane and maybe some things are out of focus and some things are in focus, with crazy stuff in the background totally out of focus. So that's kind of what bokeh is, but there's a trick to getting it. And it's really hard to get bokeh in a cell phone camera. It really is. I mean, you have to go to, you know, portrait mode or something like that. You have to do it in software. So more or less we're talking for like film cameras or DSLRs or mirrorless digital cameras or something. But mostly when I'm using my smartphone, I'm not looking to create bokeh in my images. So what are some examples? So let's look at this. You'll see this landscape. Everything is in focus. I mean, from where the camera is at into infinity, everything is in focus. You see the background, you see the horizon, you see things in the foreground, everything is in focus. But here's an example of really good bokeh. So this one, you see, this is a flower. This was at the John Muir Historical Site in California. This is his homestead. And so these are I took some pictures of some flowers around his house. And you see the flower is in really sharp focus. But things in the foreground, right, and the background are just out of focus. And that's because we have, instead of having a broad focus, like let's say this is the camera and this is like infinity, where everything is in focus like that we showed in the landscape, here we have a very thin area, slice of where everything is in focus. But before we talk about, you know, putting bokeh in everything, we should ask, is bokeh appropriate for what I'm getting ready to shoot? Do I want that bokeh effect in my photo? Catching something fast, like a fast happening event, or something that's more documentarian, do you really? No, not really. This is, I guess for me, bokeh is more of an artistic effect. But there's like some things I just can't get the bokeh I want because the moment was fleeting. Here's an example out of my backyard. Yesterday, in fact, there was a quail in the backyard. This quail sitting on the stone fence out back was just sitting there watching as her newborn chick, you don't see the chicks in the photo, but all the newborn chicks were eating on the weeds that I was too lazy to weed whack out of the backyard. Now, I'd like to have gotten more background to her, but I didn't have long to decide, and okay, let's compensate. Let's do aperture priority. Let's flip it over to f/22. Let's refocus, recompose, and then the bird's gone. It was more important to capture a sharp image of the Gambel's quail than it was to, I mean, sometimes you can't get the perfect image, and there really isn't anything, I don't think, as the perfect image. There's always some little something that somebody will disagree with. There's not always a perfect photo, and there's always going to be somebody that nitpicks, and don't let that get you down. We have to decide what is a subject that's worthy of bokeh. Typically, landscapes aren't. Flowers really are a good subject, you know, but this is a decision you have to make, you know, and sometimes you don't have time to get that shot. Now, some cameras you can have push a button, you can pre-program a button to have one setup versus another, and it's just click, 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 and you can go from one kind of configuration to another, and it's really, really awesome. But, you know, like manual cameras or smartphones or whatever, you capture the image, and it's more important to capture the image than not capture it all. You know what I mean? Now we're going to move into a discussion of f-stops and aperture. I know this isn't really what you wanted to hear. A lot of people, the idea of aperture or f-stops really confuses a lot of starting photographers, and it's really kind of simple, but it doesn't look that way because this shit started 100 years ago, and there wasn't a marketing team around to advise on better phraseology. I'm just saying. Anyway, you'll see things like f1.8, f22, f16, f8, and those are just literally fractions. 1 over 22, 1 over 16, 1 over 8. They are fractions of how big the aperture. I mean, if you look at your eye, the aperture is like the iris in your eye. It opens and closes and opens and closes. Unless you've really been hitting the meth, then it's not going to close a whole lot. You more or less got a stuck lens at that part, bro. I mean, there's nothing I can do about it. Let's table the discussion for big apertures, small apertures, the length of the lens, all that stuff to figure out what the aperture is. Let's just focus at the extremes. So if you dial your lens up all the way to f22, right? And that's the highest number on the aperture ring, then that's the smallest the aperture is going to be. That is the absolute smallest. But the smaller that number is, the more everything in his brother is in focus. The smaller it is, more in focus, the deeper your depth of field is. Everything becomes in focus. Now, let's say you want the opposite. You know, you scroll that thing all the way down to 1.8. Can you see that? 1.8? That is the biggest aperture you can get. It's letting all the light in, and that makes your focus more sensitive. So your depth of field becomes smaller. So if you just want that flower and everything else behind it or in front of it out of focus, crank your aperture down as to the biggest apertures you can get, 1.8, biggest fraction. Just that slice there will be in focus. The things in the background will have a more pronounced bokeh. The farther you go down all the way to the very bottom of your aperture ring, right? All the way down, the more pronounced the bokeh effect will be. And be careful, because sometimes the depth of field is so narrow, you may not be able to get the whole flower in focus. So you can't just go all the way down. You do have to take into consideration that you want the back of the flower maybe also in focus, and the front of the flower in focus. And in this image here again, I had a really difficult time with that because I had two problems. One, the wind was blowing the flower all over the way. And I had a difficult time maintaining because the flower was kind of a roundish flower. It just wasn't a flat petal, so it was a roundish flower. So I had kind of difficulty getting the whole flower in while getting a really nice bokeh to it. And the thing is, my focus was good. The wind was blowing the flower all over. So I took like 20 shots of that. Of course, this was on digital. 20 shots of that, and that was about the best one. It was a situation that was uncontrolled, and sometimes, hey man, you're doing wildlife or flora photography. You're out in nature doing nature photography. You're out in nature, out in the environment. Do the best you can, and still, even with all the problems that I see, probably no one else sees it. It's still a great photo, I think. I think it's still a great photo. I've always got great compliments. Oh, that's a wonderful flower. But then, you know, me being the photographer sees all the problems with it. Oh well. So that's it here for Mojo Zoo. I hope you guys have a great week. And until next time, I'll be in the darkroom. Take care. See you. Bye.